it's me, Lil. Today I'm coming at ya with a little bit of stage left with Lil, since I was able to hobble my way up to Times Square to see a show. I'm also going to tell you about my night with Anderson Cooper and Andy Cohen. We'll do some Lil's Lights Camera Action before I give you the rundown on the recent Oscar nominations. And then I'm going to unveil a new segment I'm calling Backseat Banter. So earlier this month, I went stage left with some of my favorite, most reliable actors to watch. Cynthia Nixon, Denny Burstein, and the wonderful June Squibb. If you haven't seen June's movie Thelma that came out a couple years ago, it's on Hulu, and I highly recommend you watch it. It'll make you laugh, it'll make you cry, and it's another masterclass performance from June, like the one she gives in this play called Marjorie Prime. First of all, can we acknowledge that she is 96 years old and she's still able to remember all her lines? I don't know if she calls for line a lot or she just has an incredibly good memory, but I can't even remember what I had for breakfast. So props to June. So Marjorie Prime by Jordan Harrison actually came out about 10 years ago. I saw it when it debuted off-Broadway at Playwrights Horizons in 2015, and I really enjoyed it. I was especially interested in it because it's kind of a sci-fi play, which you don't often see. It's not like sci-fi with like aliens descending on Earth or creatures invading your brain, but there's a sci-fi premise at the base of the story. And at the time, and let me tell you guys, this play was prophetic. When I saw it in 2015, I was like, oh yeah, that's cool. That might happen someday. Now, 10 years later, the things they were talking about in the play are basically happening. And I bet in another 10 years, they will have happened. And then another 50 years from that, people will look back and be like, remember when? So the plot centers around this elderly woman named Marjorie, played by June Squibb, whose daughter and son-in-law, played by Cynthia Nixon and Danny Bernstein, get her this, what they call an AI prime, which is kind of a sophisticated AI droid chatbot, which is a replica of her dead husband, Walter, as he was in his early 30s, played by Christopher Lowell. What's interesting is the more you talk to these primes, the more information you feed them, the better they are at becoming, quote unquote, more human. This is really interesting because Marjorie is losing her memory. So some of the information she's sharing with Prime Walter might be made up or incorrect. Apparently, there's something similar that you can get right now that allows you to chat with your dead loved ones, which I think I'd be into. Like, it'd be cool to like ask my dad for advice or share some good news with him. That might be fun or interesting or comforting in some way. I don't know. I'd probably do the free trial version first to make sure I'm not too creeped out by it. So June does a really great job playing this character who's like, most elderly people with their mercurial moods. One minute she's happy and telling one-liners with a twinkle in her eye, and then she goes to being frustrated and angry with her daughter and son-in-law. In the original off-Broadway production, Marjorie was played by Lois Smith, another great actress of advanced age who is lovely, and she was great. But June really made Marjorie a more fully realized person, and she's the actress that I would cast over and over again in this part. Cynthia Nixon is brilliant as ever, playing Marjorie's brittle, kind of acerbic, and pretty skeptical daughter. She's not really into the whole AI chatbot thing, but her husband, Danny Bernstein, who's always solid, always reliable, is more willing to give it a try. The interplay between the three is great. And what can I say about Christopher Lowell as Prime Walter? He's pretty robotic, which I guess is what the script calls for. Some of the themes in this play around memory and grief, those are always going to be relevant. But it's just so crazy to think about how much has changed since the play originally debuted. Like, we didn't even have ChatGPT until 2022. Now it's almost part of lots of people's everyday lives. So we're getting closer and closer to the reality that Harrison talks about in this play. It'd be really interesting to see how it ages in another 10 years, I guess. Anyway, this gets a Lil's letter grade of an A+. I encourage you to go see it at the Helen Hayes Theater. It's a second stage production and it runs through February 15th. Let's transition over to my night with Andy Cohen and Anderson Cooper. Andy and Anderson are two of my favorite television personalities. I love watching them do their New Year's Eve show. They both make me think about things in different ways. They have a friendship that's really delightful to see play out because Anderson is a little bit stoic and more forthright and logical and straight ahead, and Andy's kind of wacky and wants to get into everybody's business and just have a good time overall. Basically, I'm Andy and Ray's Anderson. I see a lot of similarities in our two friendships. In fact, Andy was telling the story about how he set it up on Anderson's phone so that he can see Anderson's location. And Anderson was like, he'll randomly text me and be like, why are you on 34th Street? What are you doing at the airport? Which is totally something I used to do to Ray. And then he told me to stop. So this is actually my fourth time seeing Andy and Anderson in conversation. You know, they talk about both their careers, the trips, the things they've done together, how their friendship has evolved, etc. But this is their first time doing this conversation since before the pandemic. And things have really changed for both of them. They're both fathers now, which is great, but it doesn't really make for interesting discussion for me personally to listen to. The kids are adorable though. And then coming back to grief, in 2022, Anderson launched this podcast called All There Is, which is about people who are experiencing grief and loss. You know, my dad passed away in 2021, and all my friends were trying to be supportive of me, and one of my friends recommended I check out the podcast. I know she really meant well, but I don't think I was quite ready for that level of interaction around the topic. It was pretty depressing. I think I could go back now and maybe listen to it a little more objectively. But anyway, so there's a big chunk of the conversation that was centered around the grief podcast and all the sad stories about him losing his brother at a young age, and then his father, and then most recently his mother. We take audience questions at the end, so a lot of the questions were people who wanted to talk about the grief podcast or grief. So it just wasn't like the fun, lighthearted night that I usually get from them, which is what I came for. I get it. People's lives change and they evolve. So I can't expect them to be the same every time, but I'm just hoping the next conversation won't be as heavy. Also, they really need to vet these audience questions in advance. People were asking some crazy shit and it was really embarrassing. I was sinking lower and lower into my seat the crazier the questions got. One lady was like, have you seen When Harry Met Sally? And they were like, of course Anderson was like, no. And she was like, well, Anderson, you're Sally, and Andy is Harry. And then he was like, you think we should get together? She was like, yes. And he was like, that's absolutely never happening. Anyway, I'll still come back for another show and see how their friendship and lives have changed some more. Oh, another wild story Anderson told about him and Andy was about how for some reason he has more stalkers than Andy has, which kind of makes sense for me. And particularly this one Japanese lady who comes around like once or twice a year and tries to find him. Anderson said that one time she came up to Andy at the gym and she was like, "Have you seen Anderson?" And he was like, "No, but if you want to see him, you better hurry because he's leaving town soon." Not realizing that it was Anderson's stalker. So that was wild and reminded me of another time when a colleague asked for another colleague's phone number and I sent them like the person's full contact info with like address, home phone number, buzzer number to buzz her apartment, and then the person started stalking the other person whose info I gave out. So I felt really bad about that. It was not cool. So the moral of the story is trust but verify to make sure the person is not a stalker before you give out a friend's info. We're going to switch over to Lil's Lights Camera Action, talk about some of the films I've seen recently. One of the best ones I've seen recently also centers around grief. Between this, Mercury Prime, AC2, Hamnet, I'm like in grief overload. But this film I actually really appreciated and enjoyed more than Hamnet. It's called Train Dreams. You guys, this movie gave me all the feels. Just within the first 30 minutes to an hour, I went from joyful to devastated, peaceful to anxiety ridden. It was a roller coaster of emotions. I had to pause after the first hour and take a break and watch the rest later because I knew it was going to have a really happy ending or a really sad ending. But I knew I was going to cry either way. The movie follows the life of this man from Idaho called Robert Grenier. He's played by Joel Edgerton. And the whole film is narrated by Will Patton, who does an excellent job telling us the story of this man's life. You might remember Will as Jamie's real dad on Yellowstone. Even though we don't see him in this movie, this is one of his best performances ever. So Robert starts his career as a railway worker, and then after some time, he meets a woman played by Felicity Jones. They get married, they have a kid, and then eventually Robert moves into logging work, which takes him away from the family, kind of long periods of time. This probably sounds super boring, but it's really an excellent film. Let's just talk about the cinematography to begin with. Everything is so beautifully shot. Or somehow, I've never seen this in a movie, but they were able to capture the colors of the sunset and the sunrise so perfectly and so vividly. You could see every shade of purple, orange, blue. It was really stunning. Aside from Will Patton, the featured players are really amazing. Joel Edgerton, he's always kind of giving us quiet strength or quiet determination or quiet creepiness like he was in The Gift. But here, he gives us a quiet gentleness, also mixed with a quiet passion. It's just a really stellar performance. You buy every word that comes out of his mouth, and you really believe that this Robert guy may have actually existed. I should say that the movie is based on a novella by Dennis Johnson, and it's directed by Clint Bentley, who gave us the movie Sing Sing last year, which is about some prisoners working together on a Shakespeare production. Coleman Domingo's in it, and he's great. Another worthwhile watch. So Joel has gotten a lot of acclaim and nominations for this role, quite deservedly, but he was overlooked by the Oscars, which is very, very annoying. We'll talk more about the Oscars later. So as a meditation on grief. This film hit me harder than Hamnet. I was more deeply invested. I think that all really comes down to Joel's performance. William H. Macy also makes a cameo as one of Robert's logger friends. He's pretty unrecognizable, so it takes you a minute to be like, is that William H. Macy? No, he looks kind of rough. And then you're like, oh, it is William H. Macy. Another thing that comes up in the movie is the idea of new technology making some jobs obsolete. Robert can't get any more logging jobs because there's now chainsaws and much more efficient ways of collecting timber now. So he ends up taking some odd jobs here and there into his latter years. Once again, this is a really well-made film. It's streaming on Netflix. It gets a Lil's letter grade of an A+. Watch it. Now, on the same thread of people losing their jobs due to new technology, which is something really real that's going on right now, let's talk about a new movie from Korean director Park Chan-wook, who also gave us The Handmaiden, which I still haven't seen because apparently the sex scenes are like just kind of over the top and pretty explicit. No, I'm not a prude, but I just need to be in the right mental space and prepared to see all that kind of stuff happening on film. Anyway, this new movie is called No Other Choice. It too has gotten lots of acclaim. It was nominated for a Golden Globe for Best Picture and Best Foreign Language Film, but once again, overlooked by the Oscars. It's really strange. It's also based on a novel about a man who loses his job at this paper factory that he's worked at for 25 years and shows how difficult it is for him to adjust to this new life and find a new job. I was like, great, let's go, I can relate to this. It's definitely a dark comedy because as you see, it takes kind of a diabolical turn, and Mansu, the central character, he goes through some pretty drastic measures to get a new job. It's a well done kind of satire, black comedy. Like Mansu in the movie, we know a lot of people are dealing with the real issue of losing their jobs due to new technology that's being implemented. The performances are really well done. Some people are saying it might be Chan-wook's masterpiece film. It's being very well received by audiences, and it's become the director's highest grossing movie. It's a quirky look at the corporate rat race that many of us are going through nowadays as we struggle to either stay employed or get employed. It's very well directed, and I give it a Lil's letter grade of an A. It's in theaters, so you still have a chance to catch it. Finally, let's talk about The Secret Agent, which I kept wanting to call The Station Agent, but that's a totally different movie that came out 20 years ago with Peter Dinklage and Patricia Clarkson in it. I kept getting confused about why I couldn't find it in the movie theater because I was looking for the wrong movie. As you know, I've had a couple of false starts trying to see this movie, including the time I went to BAM, both of the BAM theaters, and it was sold out. Well, I finally saw it, and before I get into the meat of it, I wanted to tell you about the trailer that I saw before it, which was for the new Spielberg movie, Disclosure Day, that's coming out this summer, and let me tell y'all, it looks good AF. You know, Spielberg, he can do anything, but when he does sci-fi, that's like the best. It's his calling card. It has Emily Blunt, Josh O'Connor, and Coleman Domingo in it, so I will be there opening day. Anyway, this is the last film I had to see before I'd finally all 10 films nominated for the Best Picture Oscar. This one was fine. It was kind of a case of why the hype? Because I was expecting something fantastic, and it was just okay. It's about this widower, Armando, who gets on the bad side of some criminals, put out a contract killing on him. He goes to hide at this old lady's house with a bunch of other people who are seeking refuge. Old lady by the way, was excellent. Tanya Maria, she was really strong and funny, and in a lot of ways was the heartbeat of the movie. So most of the movie is about Armando trying to evade these contract killers. And while that sounds kind of interesting, mind you, this was a 3-hour movie, and it didn't really pick up until hour 2, when there was a lot more action and moments that made you want to lean forward in your chair. I will give it that there were 2 moments in the movie that left me with my mouth literally agape for like 10 seconds, like I could have caught flies in my mouth. One of the main things people are praising for this movie is Wagner Moura's performance as Armando. He's a Brazilian actor. The whole movie takes place in Brazil and it's in Portuguese. And I will concede, he gave a really strong performance. There was 2 really great moments when he was conveying a lot of emotion just with his eyes that I thought was really good. He's nominated for Best Actor for the Oscars. But the only thing remarkable about his performance is that he plays Armando, and then he plays Armando's son decades later. And he did a really good job making the son very distinct from the father, but with just enough similarities. The son has a different walk, way of speaking, and mannerisms than the dad. So that was pretty neat. The other thing I'll say is the score was really good for this, and there's a lot of cute Brazilian guys in it. Even the old guys had like 6-packs. I was like, wow, I gotta get down to Brazil ASAP. So for the average Joe, I don't think this is really worth the 3 hours. Definitely could have been benefited from some editing. You definitely don't have to run to see it, and I give it a Lil's letter grade of a B-. I did want to take a few minutes to talk about some recent thrillers that I've seen. Remember how I told you that the ending for All Her Fault was kind of wild? Well, these 2 that I just saw outwilded All Her Fault. It feels like the mystery thriller novelists are all trying to outdo each other to see who can come up with the most outlandish twist or reveal at the end, just so they can get a Netflix deal. One of the thrillers I watched that was based on a book, just like All Her Fault, was The Housemaid, which one of my friends really did enjoy the book and has read everything by that author. So I was kind of interested in checking out the movie. It stars Sydney Sweeney as a nanny who goes to work for an affluent family with a mother played by Amanda Seyfried. Now, Amanda is usually a solid actress, especially if she has a good script. Sydney Sweeney can also be a good actress, but only when she has good script. And the script for this was awful. Amanda's performance is so over the top. Storyline is so ridiculous. The ending's so head-scratching that you can't believe this is really all happening. I think in 10 years we might look back on this as one of those fun, campy cult classics, but has not attained that level of love to hate. The next thriller based on a book that I watched was His and Hers, which is a limited series on Netflix, which was a good, fun binge for a Sunday afternoon. It's only 6 episodes, so it's really easy. It's about this woman who's dealing with the loss of her child, and then she comes back to her Georgia hometown, where she kind of battles with her estranged husband, who's a police officer investigating a recent murder. Tessa Thompson, who I love and once accosted at the Taco Hut, was really good in this, but the material is not worthy of her talents. The husband is played by John Bernthal, who's doing his usual tough guy thing, always kind of the same Z. So yeah, it was a quick, fun watch. But once again, the ending was so crazy. It was damn near implausible. Some of these new thrillers are bordering on melodrama. I feel like some of these plot lines could be in the soap operas that I used to watch when I was little. The only thing that really grounds them is good performances like the ones in All Her Fault. But otherwise, this is an alarming trend. I give both The Housemaid and His and Hers a Lil's letter grade of a C. Now let's talk about the award show, which is the pinnacle of award season, the Academy Awards, which announced its nominations last Thursday. There were a couple of surprises and a fair amount of snubs, too. They had 10 movies nominated for Best Picture, which was a change they made a few years ago, where they changed the number of movies in that category from 5 to 10 to acknowledge more movies that resonated a lot with audiences more than they may have with critics. I feel like it's excessive, and they should probably do what the Golden Globes did and make a separate category for cinematic and box office achievement, where those audience-friendly, big box office movies can be awarded. I'll tell you which films are nominated for Best Picture, and I will also rank them in order of the ones I like the best to least, and the one that I think should win. But let's start with another category. Best Director. We have Chloe Zhao for Hamnet. Chloe, great director. Love Nomadland. This is a really well-made movie, but just not for me. Josh Safdie for Marty Supreme. Very good. P.T. Anderson for One Battle After Another. Excellent. Joachim Trier for Sentimental Value. No. And Ryan Coogler for Sinners. I'm pretty torn here between P.T. Anderson and Ryan Coogler. I feel like this is definitely not P.T.'s best movie, and if he wins, they're pretty much awarding him for his body of work, and he might not have another chance to win, so I would say give it to him. But Ryan Coogler's direction is so strong. But on the other hand, I think he's still young and has lots of greatness in him and more fantastic movies to make, so we can wait to honor him. I know I should be rooting for Everybody Black, and either one of them could drop dead tomorrow, but it's more likely for Paul Thomas Anderson to, so I say give it to him. Best Actor, we have my sweet little Timothée Chalamet from Marty Supreme, my other beloved Leonardo DiCaprio from One Battle After Another, Ethan Hawke in Blue Moon, Michael B. Jordan, The Boyfriend in My Mind, for Sinners, and Wagner Moura for The Secret Agent. I feel like this is Timothée's to lose here. Michael B. Jordan's performance is quite an accomplishment. He was playing twins, and he did both the roles very well. I haven't seen Ethan Hawke in Blue Moon, so I can't say anything about that. I already talked about Wagner in Secret Agent, and the one snub in this category that people are really talking about is Paul Mescal for Hamnet, which, if you listen to my rant on that, was not his best performance, so I wouldn't have nominated him either. In the Best Actress category, we have Jessie Buckley for Hamnet, Rose Byrne for If I Had Legs I'd Kick You, yay! Kate Hudson for Song Sun Blue, Renata Rensviv for Sentimental Value, and Emma Stone for Begonia. Now, if you've been listening to this for a while, I've been raving about Rose Byrne in If I Had Legs I'd Kick You for several months now. I predicted this nomination. I stand by it. She's my top pick. Everybody else, I'm sure, is fine. Her biggest competition is Jessie Buckley for Hamnet. It was great and has been sweeping up the awards. But Rose Byrne's performance was so full and just visceral and in your face. It's like nothing you've ever seen. I haven't seen Kate Hudson in Song Sung Blue. When I told Mommy that she was nominated, Mommy said she thinks she deserves it. But, that's Mommy. A lot of people are saying that slot should have gone to Amanda Seyfried for Testament of Anne Lee, which I told you looked very intense and interesting from the trailer alone. I still haven't seen it, but just based on the trailer, I'm sure Amanda's performance is better than Kate's. Best Supporting Actor, it's a strong lineup. Benicio del Toro, Jacob Elordi, Delroy Lindo, Sean Penn, and Stellan Skarsgård. I think all these men are equally deserving, but Delroy has a little bit of an edge because he too has a fine body of work, and he's given us many strong performances over the years. So I'd love to see him win. Best Supporting Actress in a Supporting Role. I think this is the category where we have the most uncertainty. It could really go either way. We have Elle Fanning, Inga Isbader-Lies, Amy Madigan, Wunmi Mosaku, and Teyana Taylor. Now, any of the last three could win it. They all deserve it, but I'll have to give this one a little more thought before I commit to a prediction. In the Best Original Song category, we have our darling, ever-present, ever-losing Diane Warren with the song from the documentary about her career as songwriter. Now, dear Diane, who not only writes movies for films, she also has written lots of songs for some of our favorite singers that have gone on to be top 10 hits, like Break My Heart by Toni Braxton, Because You Loved Me by Celine Dion, I Don't Want to Miss a Thing by Aerosmith. Diane has been nominated pretty much every year since 1983. She has 17 nominations for Best Song, and she has never won. In 2022, they threw her a bone and finally gave her an honorary Oscar, but it's really a shame that she can't get a competitive win in this category. The other nominated songs are Golden from K-pop Demon Hunters, I Lied to You from Sinners, Sweet Dreams of Joy from Viva Verdi, which I've never even heard of, and Train Dreams from Train Dreams, which as soon as that track started playing over the credits, you could tell right away at first that it was Nick Cave. And then I was like, oh, this is Nick Cave's play for the Oscar. Good for him. And he got the nomination, but he's definitely not winning this year when he's up against Golden, which has been one of the top hits of the past year, and it's pretty much unstoppable. A new category they had this year is Best Casting, which I'm happy to see, because those casting directors do deserve a pat on the back. They do really great, important work. In that category, all the nominations pretty much make sense. We have Hamnet, Party Supreme, One Battle After Another, The Secret Agent, and Sinners. If I had to pick one, I'd go with Sinners, followed by One Battle After Another. Secret Agent did have a lot of really good supporting players, so I'll give it that. The only snub I was really disappointed at was that No Other Choice, which I just talked about, got no love and was shut out of the Best Foreign Film category when it's been receiving nominations for that at almost every other award show. So that was weird. Now, one of the major snubs we had this year was Wicked for Good, which, as you remember, I said was for bad, was totally shut out of all the categories. No Best Director for John Chu, certainly wasn't in Best Picture, no Supporting Actress for Ariana Grande. I was fine with all of that. The only omission that is pretty egregious is Paul Tazewell should definitely be nominated for Best Costume Design. That doesn't sit right with me. He should certainly be in there over this Deborah L. Scott from Avatar Fire and Ash. I mean, what the hell? First of all, James Cameron just keeps making the same movie over and over again. And I can't imagine the costumes in this third movie are any better or different from the ones In the first movie, it's pretty much all loincloths and tribal jewelry. The other nominees are Frankenstein, Hamnet, which I really did not love the costume design, Marty Supreme, and Sinners. My vote would probably go to Frankenstein. So now, let's talk about the Best Picture nominees, and I'm going to state them in the order of most deserving to win. My top pick, you've heard me talking about this before. One of the I think this is one of the most excellent films of the last 5 years. You guys know I'm a horror stan. It's one of the best horror movies ever. I really wanted to take the award. As we know, the Academy does not always give due respect to horror movies. It's very rare that a horror movie gets any nomination. Sometimes makeup and effects, but never Best Picture. And I think the only one that I can think of anyway, horror movie to be nominated for Best Picture was The Exorcist, which is another one of my favorite horror movies. And that was like 5 decades ago. So Sinners is my top pick. Get Out was awarded that one year for Best Original Screenplay. Totally deserving. But the Academy typically does not give horror movies the recognition they deserve. I really want Sinners to win and break the curse. I'm afraid voters still really won't understand the themes and greatness of this movie. My next pick is One Battle After Another, which you know I really enjoyed, and I love P.T. Anderson. Next, I would want Train Dreams to win. You heard me rave about that movie. And then I would say Marty Supreme, because of Timothee's excellent performance. Then, I don't know, maybe I put Hamnet next, because it is a really made film, and I love that Chloe is one of the few female directors to ever win an Oscar, so I'm always rooting for her. I just didn't enjoy the film as much as Begonia, which is also nominated, and I could swap places with either of those movies. Then I would say Frankenstein, which is a really fun watch, then The Secret Agent, and then Sentimental Value, which you guys know I did not enjoy at all. But the very last movie that I expected to be nominated for Best Picture this year, that's in the category, is F1. Yes, that Brad Pitt race car movie that came out over the summer. Now, that was a really fun summer flick, great action movie. We'll say that the sound design is excellent. Brad is really good as always. But is this an Oscar-worthy movie? No. So that was really surprising. So we have a couple more award shows leading up to the Oscars, which takes place on March 15th. We have the BAFTA Awards coming on February 22nd. That's the British Academy of Film and Television Awards. And then the SAGs on March 1st. So after those, we'll get a better sense of who might go home with the Oscar. Stay tuned. Now here's a new segment that I'm calling Backseat Banter, which actually originated from another podcast idea I had before the pandemic, which I was going to call Poolside Stories, and it was about all the wacky conversations I had with people when I took Uber Pool, which is like the commuter version of Uber. I actually recorded some of these conversations because they were so wild, and I shared them with some friends. But then, when I thought about the legal and moral questionability of the idea, I stopped doing it. And then also, Uber Pool went away for a long time because it was the pandemic. So this time in Backseat Banter, I figured I'll just relay the stories directly to you, dear listener. As you know, I've been taking lots of Ubers because of my bum foot. I always think it's interesting to get the background stories from my drivers. They usually have pretty cool things to say. So on this one ride, I met Hakan from Turkey, who lives with his 2 kids in Stony Brook out in Long Island. And he saw my boot and he asked what happened. I was like, oh, I ruptured my Achilles tendon. He was like, oh, One of my friends, this guy, he was really athletic all his life, a bodybuilder, and one day he was moving a mattress outside to the curb, and the mattress fell on him and rendered him paralyzed from the neck down. I was like, what the F? Well, now I feel a little better about my injury. Could have been a lot worse. A lot worse. So we were talking about like insurance and stuff in general. And he was telling me about his dogs that he has. He has like, I think 2 or 3 German Shepherds. And one time one of them got sick because him and his son were using, those popper things that we used to throw on the ground and they explode when we were kids. So like one of them exploded and got in the dog's eye. So he's freaking out. And he called the vet, and the vet was like, no, you have to call this number first and do like an intake before we'll see the dog. That intake cost like $100. And basically it was somebody telling him to send the dog to the vet. So we talked about how all insurance, even pet insurance, is basically a scam. He also told me that sage and sesame oil is very good for treating aches and pains. So I might give that a try. After the pandemic, Uber Pool was replaced by Uber Share. Same concept, different name. So I was in a pool recently with this nice young man named Steve, who it turned out he was a writer and a filmmaker. And he was telling me that he was born and raised in New York. His family's from East New York, but he decided to get out of the city, go to film school at the Film Academy out in LA. I asked him who some of his favorite writers and directors are. He said David Lynch. So then I knew he was cool. So we talked a lot about movies. Then he also mentioned that he has 2 sisters, one that's really into Disney, so they're going to make a trip there this year, and another one that's an esthetician that works at a salon by the Barclays Center. She does facials. And I was like, is it Glow Bar? He was like, yeah. I was like, oh, I go there for my facials sometimes. And he was like, yeah, my sister's name is Danae or something like that, something with a D. I was like, great, I'll ask for her next time I go. So that was fun. And then another thing related to Steve is I was checking my LinkedIn inbox as I do once a month. I'd probably have a really great job by now if I checked it more frequently. I always find messages from people trying to hire me, but I don't see them until like 3 weeks later. Anyway, this particular message that was in my inbox was from some random guy. I was like, who is this guy? You get a lot of random emails in your LinkedIn inbox. I was like, I don't know who this is. But then I took a closer look and I was like, oh, he looks kind of familiar. He looks like that kid I was in an Uber with earlier this month. So I read the message and it was from Steve, the filmmaker. He was saying that one of his producers also graduated from NYU like me, so he wanted to connect us. And I was like, yeah, sure, Steve, that's great. So that's funny. At first I was kind of even wondering how he got my full name. I did tell him about the podcast, but I was like, how does he know my full name? And then I looked at the podcast description on Apple Podcasts, and it totally has my full name on there, so mystery solved. Okay, that's all for today. But before I leave, I did want to tease for you guys that my amazing friend Crystal Worrell is helping me produce my new segment, which I'm calling In the Limelight with Lil, where I'll be interviewing artists who are living legends in their fields. Up first, I'll be talking to a talented poet, playwright, and director out of the Bay Area, whose work the San Francisco Chronicle has called distinguished with sardonic humor and an often searing emotional tone. You won't want to miss it, so stay tuned.